Welcome back to Root Cause. I'm your host, Cali Whitwell, and today we're going to be talking about crop planting and how that can lead to being a more profitable farmer. Joining me today, I have returning guests, Josh Thurman, Nicole Glenn, and Kaleb Dinwiddie. So in the last episode, we covered a lot about just different crop plans and stuff like that, but right now I want to break it down by each crop. So right now, everybody's focused on wheat and blowing up Josh's phone, needing advice.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
The first thing you want to do is try to look at any redundancies there. There's a lot of redundant things that are done in ag, but as Kaleb and I were talking previously, it's just kind of like low-hanging fruit. What are the first reductions we can make? And where I sit is generally nitrate, if we can handle that differently and not just treat it like it's on an island, So if we're saying we're in no-till wheat around here, you're probably, 120 up to 130 because if we use Palisade, all right, we get to use more nitrogen. I don't know that that's necessary. So, again.
All right, let's put the farmer talk to this. Our yield goes 100.
Okay.
And today, prices have lately been over 600. Let's just use $600 of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how much money can we raise? How little of money can we raise this crop for?
That's it.
We need to be at $200 on seed, chem, fert, and crop insurance as cost.
How we get there?
How do we get there?
All right, let's talk about it. Again, starting back with nitrate. If you're using 120 on no-till, let's just say that's what it is, and you go to Palisade, they want you to use 10 more, push the yield. Is that what we're limiting our yield? Doubt it. Anyway, we're at 130. Well, I think we can make a 40-pound reduction right there off the get-go. Now, it's not treated on an island. We got to add some cost back into that, but that cost you're adding back into that is what? $7 a pass? $7 a pass right there. You cut 40 units, 14, 6. You're still 6 cheaper at 50 cents a unit nitrogen.
So if you don't over nitrate the wheat plant, it won't fall over.
Right. You get that rapid vegetative growth winking in the cell walls.
And we're trying to get a 90% use rate on the nitrogen we put. So our goal, as we went over in the previous podcast, is to increase
efficiencies.
The amount of nitrogen. We're actually going to decrease the application and increase the efficiency.
You hit the nail on the head. We're decreasing nitrogen use, increasing the efficiency of what we're using. Yes, correct. And also hold it in some forms that's probably not as deleterious as nitrate can be. And then we can also look at coming up, you're going to have what they would usually tell you is going to be a fungicide and an insecticide shot coming up here, right?
Yep.
Right there, and we get that joint above ground, they're going to say, I'll put a fungicide and insecticide with your Palisade. Let's look at those. Let's look at some.
Well, that kind of goes back to that. You're saying increase in nitrogen, but then we need to apply a Palisade. Does that make sense to many people?
Not to me, no.
Yeah.
But I'm not many people.
But that's what they do in England, and that's where they got that's the wheat yields we all
want.
want.
Okay, but still, yeah, for sure. I don't want my plant to fall down, but I don't want your plant to fall down either. And I'm not going to let your plant fall down. So first off, we're taking that excess nitrate out of the system, a big vegetative growth index right there, weakening the cell walls. Okay, now let's talk about Palisade. Can we probably don't use brand names, but growth regulator, fungicide, insecticides, 10, 12, 22. There's $24 of stuff we're playing with right there. Well, I would just assume add 3 specific traits.
Plus the extra nitrogen.
Yes. Then we got $24 there. I can add 3 traces and some reducing and non-reducing sugars and a carbon source for a lot less than that.
Because you already set your biology and activity.
Yes.
It's warming up, so it's becoming available.
Let's feed that. Let's feed the biology with some sugar. Let's give the plant some energy too. We're also looking at an energy source. We also want to give that plant some energy. So that's what we're doing with some specific reducing and non-reducing sugars there. We'll put some carbon into the plant as well. We're still using herbicides. We have to. So let's throw something in there to help metabolize that herbicide a little more efficiently so we don't steal any of the energy from our plant. Then we'll throw some specific trace minerals in there to play to the functions that we want to cell strength, to disease protection, and insect prevention. All right, so we're doing that. All right, and then the next shot of nitrogen comes back. We put 12 gallons of 20 on the first shot, let's say that. We're getting 36. We're going to come back with another 15 or 16. Oh, that's not enough. No, it's plenty. It's plenty. Again, we're going to come back with some carbon, some sugar sources, some other things, some enzyme cofactors. We're on our way.
That's important to note is we're not just pulling back on, say, the nitrogen or the fungicides or the Palisade. We have to, as of right now, incorporate some of those trace minerals in to make sure that that plant is healthy. So eventually, once we have, our soil health we're, better off anyway. We have more biological activity in there. Hopefully we can pull away from a lot of that stuff. So we're not saying go out there and just reduce the amount of nitrogen that you're putting on your wheat. We do need to incorporate other things in there to help balance that out.
Yeah, 100%.
So if you cut your nitrogen and you don't do those measures, you're going to fall on your face.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yes, we
it.
will be the first to tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna make it look real bad real quick.
Yep.
But to be fair, we probably need to be more efficient on our wheat anyway because we're well over a pound for a bushel of wheat. We don't need to be there.
All right. So going to the next step, this is that application's coming up now. Then we got another nitrogen application coming up, and we got it. So what do you say about boron? It's the highway for
No, it's sugar. Not sugar. It's gonna move the sugar through that plant. Also, boron works when you're using nitrate. It's probably bonus content. When you're using nitrate, it really ups it decreases the uptake of boron. So we add some boron with that to help it move up through that plant and help move the sugars through that plant as well. And then you want to keep your sulfur in there 8-to-1 to 10-to-1. I guess we probably need to be at 8-to-1. Most are at 10-to-1, but a lot of people are mixing sulfur at 28005, I do believe now. So, you don't want to give away everything for free. We got to make a living here, folks. But
Josh, let's talk about some metrics of how we're kind of measuring this right now. So, let's take one of the farmers, for example, that have already made one of those trace mineral applications with, say, their first shot of nitrogen. So what are we looking at right now with the refractometer, looking at the Brix level in that plant? So we've already made just one application. We plan to make a couple of more applications of trace minerals throughout the season, but we are seeing a substantial increase in that Brix level. Mm-hmm. So what that Brix level is telling you is pretty much the health of that plant. So the higher that Brix level, ideally we want to get it, above 12, above 14, so we won't have pests, whether that be disease or insects later on in the season. What are we seeing right now with that?
Yeah, I was taking some on your farm yesterday in the Norwoods up the road who have been in this protocol, and the lowest I've seen doing it's a 13.2. The highest was Brian and I were out last week, saw some at 16, 14.5, 14.9, and it tells you you're doing a phenomenal job. Yes, it's easy to spike Brix. That's not a hard thing to do. But you're talking about holding these things 2 to 3 weeks.
Maintaining that Brix level.
Maintaining that Brix. Now, I was testing Matthew Carter's field, who we had just done copper and some other things in the fall. Not by itself, but copper and some other things in the fall. And this was before we had top dressed. And I was still at 8.9 or 9.1. And across the road, whoever manages their wheat there, they had been top dressed for 2 weeks post. Those are 5.5. So there's a lot of utility in that, So we're talking about Brix, we're talking about disease prevention and insect prevention is what we're talking about there. And we're maintaining the integrity of that plant, the mineral solids of that plant. We're keeping that high. We're keeping that elevated. We have no space for disease. We have insect resilience. We have a healthier plant. We have healthier root exudates. We're feeding healthier root exudates to biology to create a healthier functioning system right there.
That's the big thing is we're not just increasing the health of that plant. So once you are increasing the health of that plant, we're also helping the biology in the soil. And I think that's the biggest thing is we're not just trying to put a Band-Aid over these crops by applying foliars. I think that's one of the biggest things, or I guess misconceptions. Well, it can be true if you're not, utilizing it in the correct way, but foliars is just a Band-Aid application. Mm-hmm. So, they say if you see manganese or phosphorus deficiency, the damage has already happened into that plant once you go apply that. And that's not necessarily true. So if we're feeding that plant to be healthier, those root exudates are being fed to that biology. So it does all work together as a system.
Mm-hmm.
And the biology there. So we do this at Organics a lot. I don't think we have, but it's primarily bacteria. A lot of times we're introducing fungi more and more. That's our hope is to get to 50-50. So the fungi eat the bacteria at a 5-to-1,
somewhere around there,
and then the protus eats the fungi at 30-to-1 or 25. So to talk a little bit more, Nicole, about that system and why that's so important to trigger for the plant to trigger what it needs so that the soil can manufacture and deliver it to it, because it moves those nutrients to the root zone some kind of way. I mean, that's really out there for me, Callie, but
yeah.
I mean,
Above my head.
that's how it works. And
Oh yeah, absolutely. So something to note: no matter what crop we're talking about, we're still going to have that bad bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa out there. But being able to have the good bacteria and microbes out there to help fight against that's ultimately what we're trying to go after. So we're still going to have, Rhizoctonia, Pythium, Phytophthora out there. But if we have the good biology to help fight against it, then that is ultimately what we're looking at, helping to feed them to make them strong. So, for example, if we're looking at some in-furrow applications, we want to be able to buffer that seed against those bad biology. So if we add in some type of seed treatment to that's biological based, we're helping buffer that seed against the bad biology by adding in the good stuff that can help fight it.
yeah.
No, and what you're talking about is the laws of the jungle. It's the biggest, it's the smallest of the biggest. It's a food web. That's what Dr. Lane calls it, the soil food web there. And that's what you're trying to do is complete that life cycle.
And we're all carrying one with our digestive tract as humans.
100%. That's what's in our guts, closely related to what's in the ground. I can't remember where I read it, but there was actually utility when people used to eat dirt to feed their gut biome.
I think this is a good one.
I'm not telling you to do that.
I was about to say, make sure to say, like, do not
don't
go
do that
there.
anymore. Don't do that anymore.
I think this is a good avenue to talk about the ways that a plant uptakes nutrients. So in school, I was taught there's 3 main ways: root interception, mass flow, and diffusion. But nobody talks about that 4th one, that rhizophagy cycle. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. Only a second, and keep
Just
your
1
words
second.
less than,
Keep them dumb.
It's
Just briefly.
It's just where you're getting bacterial metabolites have nutrients in them. Bacteria have nutrients in them running up through the root hairs, running up into the plant right there in a form that puts the plant at the energy gain. Doesn't have to go through any metabolic processes to get them in a functioning form in a plant. And then since this is a perfect cycle and it keeps happening.
So if we have that biology there
That's what you're
present,
doing
we're going to
with-
be able to have that nutrient to be able to uptake in that plant much simpler than it is in any of the other ways to do that. And that's why we want good biology in our soil.
And we need a consortium of biology. We need the fungi, the protists, the bacteria.
We're mainly bacteria dominated right
Yeah.
now to be able to balance that out. And that's a good thing, about organics is it's able to tell us a little bit about what our ratios are in the soil. So when we use, organics and they come out and actually test that, they're like, okay, well, these are the metrics that we're actually changing.
Okay.
That's a big one.
So now we're down. We're back to wheat, and the head just come out.
Yeah,
We're
right.
pollinating, and then we always head scab has been an issue for 20 years here, 30 years. I don't know.
A long time.
Yeah, and
long
it's
time.
it's devastating on wheat.
It can be.
And we've been fighting it with new ways and fungicides and timely applications. But as on the journey with these healthier plants, getting higher efficiencies out of our fertilizers and reducing those salt content so our plant health is better, we can tackle this thing with micros.
Yeah, you can, and there's a great phytopathology textbook out there to tell you all that, and you don't have to take my word for it, but I've done it. I've done it on multiple occasions where I've had head scab in surrounding fields with the latest, greatest fungicide, and where I had minerally treated and trace mineral treated fields around that, I didn't have an occurrence of head scab. And this was also the worst field. It was a swamp there on this certain occurrence I'm talking about. So it's not that fusarium isn't always there. It's that our plants are either
Overpowering it.
They either are or they aren't resilient to it. So I think it makes more sense to create a plant with resiliency instead of just waiting until we get it to go spray. I mean, and we spray every year like, yeah, we're going to get it, don't we? Because it's devastating.
Scared not to. I'll
And
be honest.
And I'm not saying not use it. Listen, I'm not saying not use it. Do it suits you there. But I'm telling you, there could be a path where you don't always have to.
Right. And to try it.
Yeah, you should. You should always delegate some acres or relegate some acres to the side of, I'm going to keep this for R&D and let's see how it goes.
See, and it feels like when you talked about that, we didn't say anything new because our goal is to keep that plant healthy to when it gets to the time when head scab would start to come in, or aphids are looking at now, like it's to help keep that plant healthy all throughout its journey. So when it's time for those diseases to start setting in, your field has, or your neighbor's field has it and yours doesn't, because you maintain the health of that plant and not just trying to chase it. So, you're having a lot of people who come in and say, okay, we'll put in these trace minerals, these micronutrients when you're applying that fungicide pass. Our goal is to start with that method, so you never have to apply that fungicide.
Yeah, you don't want to play catch up.
You don't want to play catch up.
Yeah. So, well noted. You have to be. This is a system.
Proactive.
You can't start this at head scab application time, and but there is ways to do it, and we should increase our proteins. Our wheat here is commodity. Do they measure y'all's proteins?
Yeah, we do take a lot up there to Seamer's Milling right there and get paid off milling quality.
I know proteins is big in wheat, but
you can manipulate that number. It is a calculated number, but you can definitely manipulate that number.
Yeah. So,
and I think that's where the crop plan for, wheat or any other thing is the big part of that. So, like I said, you're not trying to chase it. So if we come in early into the season and say you want to do a conventional field and then we want to do another field like this, it's having that plan from the beginning. We're not trying to chase our tails when it comes down to the weeds greening up and we want to go out there and make an application. We had a plan from the beginning. This is what we're going to do here, so we can be able to maintain that plan from the beginning.
And that's not a one-size-fits-all plan. You got to meet people, as we said before, at their context and see what's going on, what the limiting factors are, things of that nature. It's not a bam, here you go, we're fixed.
Yeah, no, it's going to be different every field.
Mm-hmm.
And on the brighter note, it's time for a bang-up wheat year in the Mid-South. We ain't had one in a while.
Man, we had one last year until May when it rained.
Not here, they didn't.
Yeah,
Quality, in my opinion, down here was down tremendously.
It rained 19 inches in May, and we just watched it go away.
Yeah.
Good thing about that is, I would say good thing is we were able to get the weed out earlier and then plant soybeans early, but then, the water faucet turned off at the end of the year, so those didn't really get the fill out either. So it would have been a great year for both if we didn't have that late season rain and then we had rain for the soybeans late season.
Boy, farming grand.
Yep.
God,
yeah.
So we've talked a lot about wheat. Let's go. Crop planting is all year round for all crops. So let's kind of look at corn and soybeans. What is the biggest opportunity for that, Nicole?
For me, they all play together, in my opinion, when we're looking at a plan. It's setting down when you get done with harvest and, you're trying to make everything pencil out at the end of the year, make sure we don't need to purchase anything because we just had grand yields. Also make your plans for, say 2025 or 2026. Let's write down all of our inputs that we do have. And at the end of the year, circle back to that and let's pencil out ROI. I think that's a big one, is we have to make this make sense. But it first starts with...
All right, I'm lost because we didn't start out with the money. So
that's I noted money first.
All right, so 200 bushels at $450, that's $900 revenue. And we need to spend, $300 and few dollars at that on inputs. And it's what, Josh, a $420 to $450 input world.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go through that selection and do that?
Hit them on that low-hanging fruit. What's the first thing on seed selection there? Do what? Think about what? Non-GMO.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Placement.
That's not an answer for everybody. I'm going to do it.
It's a thought everybody should at least have. You should have to talk yourself out of it.
Well, let's think about why. Let's tell them why. Obviously, if you're thinking about the cost reduction you get just alone from not having that traded corn, that's one. Say we're taking Roundup out of the system, pencil that in. So if we had a field that you could potentially put non-GMO on, we can test it out and then do one, and then right out the end of the year, how much money did I make on my non-GMO corn versus my not?
But you're talking $40-$50 an acre savings, and
that's just on the corn seed alone.
The corn seed alone, and in what I've been doing budgeting wise, the herbicide cost is the same.
Yeah.
So in the herbicides aren't working like they used to anyway. Mm-hmm. So we just want us to make that change, but. So we're all right. We're at 430, 450. We need to get to 300. We're at 400 now. Where do we go from here?
Oh, you're looking at me?
Well, you're
no. And here's the whole thing. Josh, I guess most of us farmers have been on a 400 pounds and 92330,
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, 220 units of nitrogen. And we can set this crop up if the weather cooperates with 160 pounds.
100%. You know, the first thing you should do out there is get whoever you're trading with there to co-op, or do it yourself. Go get you a probe. Go get one at whoever you're trading with sells fertilizer. Go get your own probe and go pull you on some farms with different soil types. Go pull you some TND, some total nutrient digestions. See what that tells you first. Then see if you want to start adding rock on top of more rock to be complexed and tied up, or do you want to start trying to extract a little bit given the current climate? Never did I say you never spread anything again. I'm saying see what you have out there. And when you see that you may have 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 pounds of phos and 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of K, you might start having a conversation with yourself as, hang on a minute.
And this is a tough crop year. We're not going to get there, but every inch we get closer.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Take a TND, and if you can not spread 920, I didn't say your plants don't need food. If you don't spread 400 pounds of 923.30, that's.
I mean, that TND is going to tell you what's in the bank and what's available.
Let's allocate
what's
some
the
dollars.
cash available.
Let's allocate some dollars for extraction, and I didn't say mine, for extraction instead of addition, because you're only going to get 15 to 20% utility out of your P and K. And again, we're not going to raise soil test levels there. We're not going to do it this way. So if you can remove some dollars there and use it in a more judicious fashion, if you want to spread some, but just cut your rate back. Add in some bacillus strains, some pseudomonas strains. I mean, organics. Let those play to it. Put those money into the budget. Enter into the carbon market with that while you're doing it to get some back end money. All right, so we're detracting some money from there. All right, what about got to spread an insecticide right here on? I have not recommended insecticide on corn since maybe ever.
And are your farmers still farming today?
No, man, yeah, still growing 260 bushel corn right and left.
Non-GMO.
Yeah, I have 304 non-GMO on some last year.
So this is one thing that intrigues me, that with the sap testing, we'll be able to treat a pound of nitrogen in non-GMO versus GMO to see how we're moving that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah,
because we can do more. We can move the needle further with less. The less restricted the genetics.
Yeah, you're right. You're not choking down that carbon metabolic pathway there. You're not doing that. And then, you have non-GMO there. It's going to be easier to elicit a response. And then say it's easier to elicit a response to that. You can spike the bricks, or not spike them, but maintain the bricks higher in non-GMO than you can a GMO. It's easier to do. It's easier to do.
So let's say we're VT and we got bricks of 13 to 15. Is tar spot going to mess my world up?
Not if we can keep it there. It won't. No. So you don't quit because it's there. It doesn't mean we stop. It doesn't mean we add a fungicide either. It means what we should do is play to some trace minerals and look at some applications and go from there. That are going to be cheaper. And then we'll have the conversation about in a coming episode about how to choose those trace minerals and forms and realize what we're doing. But this is off the subject, but we're not going to get anything fixed in ag till we get away from pounds per acre, and we've got to get to nutrient concentration. We've got to get these applications dialed into nutrient a 3% solution.
And I don't care if that's commodities or vegetables or what it is. If I have to consume 4 apples to get the same nutrient value as 1 apple as I did in the early 1900s, there's something wrong with that. Because even if we're looking at commodities, whether that be going to ethanol, we're already overproducing in that element, or if it's going to feed, it matters what those animals are consuming as well. They are micronutrient deficient.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Like we're putting out there, think about this. Let's have a quick little talk about this. You're going out there and you're spreading a pint of whatever you're spreading, of a micro on your crop, okay? But it's a V4, right? How can you still need a pint at V10? Doesn't make any sense. It's going to come back at parts per million. Well, your parts per million has changed because your weight of your plant has changed. So we got to get that into nutrient concentrations. Get where I'm getting at with this?
Yeah.
So then we're going to change the effect of the plant at that point because we're dealing in not generic math. We're dealing in totality of solution, which is a big difference.
Okay.
Which we're not there yet. We'll get there. And I know it's just a thought in my head.
Well, yeah. Kaleb, did you have something to say?
Well, I mean, so if you're reading something and your plant weighs 150 grams versus 300
That's what I'm getting.
grams,
You hit the nail on the head.
5% of 150 and 5% of 300. That's the game.
Yeah.
We're not playing that game.
So I guess the question here was we've kind of jumped all over the place, but the crop planning side of it. Go into, if it's too late for 2025, go into 2026 with a plan. At the end of the day, I don't care what your yield is if it didn't pay for it. If you didn't get a return on investment from the products that you applied, that is the biggest thing here. I don't care. I would rather show up to the coffee shop in my brand new F-250 than being like, oh, why I average 250 bushels of corn.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. So I think we need to look at it from that stance. And with the way that we're trying to incorporate in crop planning, give someone that you trust, ClearPoint Ag or whoever that you can trust a field. Give them your worst field. And what we're going to do is meet you where you're at. So like I said, we're probably going to first with reducing your nitrogen, and we're going to replace something with that, say in furrow. But at the end of the year, I want you to pencil that out. Don't just trust us. We want to make sure that it is working for your operation. So of course we're going to look at yield because that's what you're taking to the granary. But we're also going to tell you the other measures that we're able to change. So if we can meet them at yield, but also quality at the end of the year, then we are outdoing what's happening over here in the conventional. And we're looking at multiple measures of different metrics, not just yield.
No, that's it. I mean, yield is what we know. We're in contact, and we'll see what happens. We've had some conversations with people where we think we can get to some nutrient density markets.
Yeah.
We got to be able to measure that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that has to be done with all the things that we talk about to be able to
the measuring of that will be much easier than these field tests because that's a controlled environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Kaleb, so we've talked about crop planning from an agronomy standpoint. Let's talk about it from a farmer standpoint with all your other inputs, your labor, your equipment. Like, just kind of give us a rundown on what you do.
Yeah, so do you want to be doom and gloom or honest?
Honest. We just need to be honest.
Yeah.
Honest. All right. So as I sat here as a farmer today, I'm nervous because equipment values have tanked. You can't sell equipment too good because the values have tanked. And you're sitting here today with $1 million worth of equipment on your balance sheet. Now it's worth $500,000, and we've got to overcome that. So operationally in 2025, 2 weeks ago I was pumped up. We had opportunity of $5 corn. I was thinking we were, had a good chance. I still believe we're there, operationally. But then what about on the other side of this? If the other side of your financials are taking a hit from that side, all right. So the only thing we can do is just be as operationally efficient as possible in 2025. It's never mattered anymore. I mean, we gotta be very effective with what we're doing.
More business minded in a year like 2025.
And you're talking about the labor, the equipment. I mean, Brantley here on the farm called me the other day with, you want to fix this? I'm like, well, being you're broke down on the side of the road, I guess. What kind of question is that? And at the end of the day, it's a real good question. I mean, I don't know.
It's like, what can you go without
it's
until?
It's not 2015 anymore.
It's not. And so on the operational side, I mean, we just got to strive. We got adjustments we can make in inputs. There's some rent adjustments that need to be had, and that's a hard conversation. I know, so I don't know. I mean, it's just all on deck. And then at the end of the day, it's in the hands of the markets and Mother Nature. And, but we got to get set up from the beginning to have a chance.
That's exactly right, man. And what better time to change than now? And if we can shave $80 off your operating costs, but while not being at a detriment to yield, why would you not want to do that? I mean, everybody talks about the 80s. 2025 is the 80s, is a decade in 1 year because we don't have 10 years.
No.
That whole decade's playing into this 1 year.
Right.
So what are we going to do to see ourselves through it? And I understand. I understand the acute mental stress. I understand that, and I feel and I pray for everyone involved in that. But we can take a little bit off that plate. If we sit down and do this planning, we can take a little bit off that plate. And yeah, I mean, it calls on y'all to trust people like us. I get that, but there's a lot of people who have put trust in us, and we've had great success. And God bless them all. I mean, my phone's ringing 1,000 times sitting here doing this. Doing this podcast right now. I look forward to making all those calls back. But this is what we're working on. This is what we're working towards. We're working on a not to sound all hippy dippy, but a healing and restorative journey. And that's what it's doing, man. It's working. The proof's in the pudding, and it's working. You know, we've succeeded when people said it's impossible and you're going to fail. And we've time and time again.
So one of the greatest reads is the book of 1%. You know, a 1% reduction makes a big change. I mean, it sounds like who cares, but you know, 1% of 1,000 is $10. And so like those hog producers, you know, they're chasing that fourth and fifth decimal in their figures. They're much more efficient than we are as far as their planning and all, or a lot of different things. But yeah, so it's just anything you can do matters.
Let's just say my goal, ClearPoint's goal, is to not make you just through 2025. It is to stay there. I don't think there's a lot of volatility going on right now, but I don't think it's going to get any better. Let's be completely honest. If we think about regulations and what information consumers have access to, I just think there's going to be a lot more changes happening in the future. And I don't think if we, you know, a lot of people are like, we're not going to change anything right now because money is tight in 2025. That is where you're wrong. Now is where we need to start, because our goal is not to come out there and be like, apply all of these micronutrients and biology and everything's just going to be all dandy. Because if we can't make that pencil out on your budget sheet as the conventional side of things, then we're doing something wrong.
Right. And, you know, one of the bigger costs that's killing me, you know, is property and casualty insurance.
Right.
It's gone up unbelievable. So we bought a new picker a couple of years ago. I was driving it home from the dealership, and it has a 10% deductible. So if that picker burnt on the 5 miles between my shop and the deer dealership, I would have lost 90 or 100 grand right on the spot. So just in that, it's so this thing is just coming at us like a hurricane of a storm with tornadoes in it, and you just got to navigate your way through. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing.
And I mean, sometimes the less mud in a mud hole, the easier it is to get out. And, you know, I don't think we can depend on single crop beans on my farm. You know, this year, you know, I'm adjusting my acres. You know, most people are really standard in their rotation. Well, here in the South, we have more crops available to us, and we're much more likely to change than your Midwest corn bean, half and half. But it's, you know, it matters this time. Everything matters from.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, people used to be just so dogmatic in crop rotation, but you can't afford to do that anymore.
You can't do it.
You can't afford.
So while we're on the topic of crop rotation, you've been rotating out for years and years. What changes have you seen?
Well, so since I started my farming career, the whole 3 crops in 2 years is what's improved our soil health, just our soil in general. It's the only thing that's doubled our corn yields.
Okay.
In my opinion.
So Josh, walk us through how these different crops impact the soil differently.
1 second,
like how
I had to send that text. I'm sorry.
Man, it's pretty outside and wheat is growing,
I'm
so
sorry.
the phones
Go
are
ahead.
going.
No, so how do different crops, like rotating them out, how does that impact your soil?
Well, every crop's going to have a different exudate profile, carbohydrate profile, amino acid profile. So there's going to be different strains of bacteria and biology and fungi. Some crops, some crops don't have arbuscular mycorrhizae association. I do not believe that brassicas associate with. Yeah, I think that's right. Rapeseeds don't associate mycorrhizae. So there's always this interrelational or spatial and intercellular relationship between biology and crops, the roots and the microbiology. So if you're looking at it from just if you're looking at it from just that aspect, it's a foreign thing for the ground to be growing one crop. It's like, what's going on? There's just one thing growing on me right now. Like if we were looking at it from that aspect, it doesn't really understand what's going on because that is not natural. It's not natural to plant things in a pretty row and have oxidized bare space in between that and in another pretty row of a crop. So to your point, which maybe not to your point, but to the point, cover crops is probably an aggressive mix and species of cover crop. And I'm not an expert. We can get one on here. State of Tennessee's got one of the smartest guys I've ever met, Adam Daugherty, just a brilliant guy. Anyway, cover crops is going to be your go-to there. And it's not going to be I threw some rye out there. No, again, you're throwing a mono crop out there. We don't need that. We need, I think Christine Jones says it's you need 8 to 16 different families out there, to create that natural, what you're getting at, super organism to be working together in there, to have that great universe. It's a universe, to have that great universe under your feet going at it right now. Because when we're doing it just species by species, like monocropping is what we're doing, monoculture, we can definitely make that better. Like we can play to the system and add some things or detract some things to make that better. But what we can add in cover crops, we can really make this thing explode.
So what does Dr. Don Huber say? He says 85% of decreasing, or 85% of disease suppression comes from that
previous crop.
That following crop or previous crop. Yeah. So that means that crop rotations are huge. So if we are in the corn and soybean rotation, being able to incorporate something in winter cover crops, I don't care what it is, radish, wheat, oats, it's going to be interacting with that microbiology in the soil differently. Each of these crops are interacting with that biology differently. So if we're adding in those different root exudates in there, we are feeding certain biology from these different root systems. That's why crop rotation is so important, in just incorporating in different root systems have different benefits.
Disease suppressive soil is what we want to get to.
Okay, so what's an ideal rotation? If you had your own 1,000 acres, what would you do?
Well, the ideal is corn, wheat, and beans. Here in wheat country, isn't it, Josh?
That is ideal. That's the ideal, but is that best?
Mm-hmm. And you, Callie, it's a loaded question when you think about ideal because that's going to be different everywhere. You guys here in West Tennessee have the opportunity to incorporate cotton in there, and that can break up a lot of things with that taproot system. I mean, you're literally growing a tree, so you have some opportunity there to feed some biology and break up and add aeration to that
cotton
soil.
Overall is tough on dirt.
It is, but it is also incorporating other microbiology into that soil. It is tough. Don't get me wrong, but it's something to be able to incorporate in that rotation.
The one thing it does is it really breaks that fusarium and all that. So
Exactly.
you can count on an extra 10 bushels of wheat behind cotton because you got rid of all those diseases that's living out there. So there is some benefits to it, but we got some farms that's never had, been in cotton for 50 years.
Really?
In this area. There's not as many as there was, but there.
Who's to say that if you didn't play the carbon game, you'd be better growing cover crops and getting a carbon, you're growing a cover crop. That's your monetary crop that year. You're not going to harvest it, but you're going to play that carbon game. You're going to grow a cover crop for that carbon check. Who's to say that it's not a biblical principle to rest the ground 7 years so we can get back to where we're going? I mean, seriously, to your question.
Well, why don't we rest 10% of it every year
and then what
be
we
profitable?
Do? Exactly, because what happens then? The markets. The markets respond. We should all get together. There'll never be a farmer union, and we all know why, but we should all get together and do what you just said, because then you set the markets.
We've had talks about this, should we farm or should we carbon farm? I mean, there's plenty of ways that you can make equal profit reducing that extra work.
Break even.
But Callie, there hadn't been.
But this year, what if you could get a carbon check? Yeah, he's right. It hadn't been. You could get a carbon check and you're just going to break even. So be it, right?
That
Sign me up.
That hurts when you say it that way, Josh.
Yeah. And you're, so then you don't get those phone calls that were broke down the middle of the interstate. What do you want to do? Well, that phone call don't come. So that's another thing it's affecting, you're sitting here, but for sure we're all farming acres that should be in something besides crops in this environment. So,
yeah, 100%.
So I guess we need to end on a good note here. We've talked about a lot of depressing things, and honestly, 2025 for farming can be kind of depressing, but I think there's a lot of things we can get innovative to keep farming. If people want to keep farming, make sure that we are implementing new things on the farm. So in the long run, we can be farming. I think the Lord put us in a very good position to be farmers. I think it's such a strong thing. We're not having to go to a 9 to 5 job.
We should be stewards.
We don't have to go to a 9 to 5 job, sit in a cubicle. We get to be out interacting on land that, I mean, ultimately is yours, or you're renting or whatever. It's it's a very powerful position. So let's act in that way, realize what we're doing in this system, and be grateful for that.
Yeah, I am grateful, but I won't have a job if I don't return some of these phone calls.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all, folks.
That's a wrap.
He's
Just kidding.
So
kidding.
for those that don't know
God.
Josh on a personal level, this is the best you get of his ADD world.
Whatever he's got.
and we're at the top of that mark. So,
He's tapping out.
No, I'm
Length
good.
of
Let's
sitting
keep going. I'm great.
but all right, Callie, where we at on the script here? We doing good?
How does crop? Okay, this will be it. This will be our ending note. So, how does crop rotation improve the bottom line?
I think that's what we're touching on, try to create disease-suppressive soils, and we're not doing a very good job of it. We can try to kid ourselves, but we're not. We can't arbitrarily pick at cover crops and not thinking about what our carbon and nitrogen ratios are. We cover crops have become bastardized because it's become just how much will they pay me, and we pull the lowest hanging fruit, so how much money do we have left over? We don't even look at it that way. We should incur some costs. Maybe we should manage cover crops as an infield crop. Maybe we should try to upregulate photosynthesis on our cover crops to pour more of that carbon back into the ground in the form of soluble carbon. So I know I'm going on a rant. I can feel that, so I'm going to tone it back down. So I think what we need to do is look at cover crops as a tool to get us to where we are going, another call, instead of something that we look at as a nuisance. We shouldn't look at it that way. If we're planting cover crops, let's let them do what they're intended. If we have a cover crop and we've got good mass right there, we got good biomass up to our waist, let's not look at that and be like, oh man, I'll never plant through it. Think of the good that's done for you, okay? First off, your planting date's not April 1st anymore, it's April 15th or April 20th. That's why we're growing it. We're not farming in the same systems. But think about the good that's doing, because you want to see above ground and get deterred, but think about the beautiful things you've done below ground, creating disease-suppressive soils, creating immunity. Let's look at the recycling principles. Reduce, reuse, recycle. We're recycling nutrient cycling, nitrogen fixation, carbon sequestration. Goodness gracious. Carbon sequestration, So we need to look at that as something that we need to say, okay, I know there's some challenges. I know there's a learning curve, but damn it, I'm man enough or woman enough to figure this out, and I'm going to see my way through it because I know it's the path. Maybe it's not traditional. Maybe it's not what I know. But I know it's what's going to get me to where I'm going.
Let's talk about if we're not doing cover crops. Just looking at diversifying on
Because that's
the farm.
most of us.
Yeah.
As I say, there's a lot of people that are going to have that learning curve with cover crops. And at the end of the day, we do not need to have brown dirt all winter long. It really doesn't make sense if you think about this whole ecology that we're trying to manage. But what we did on the farm this year is we incorporated canola in there. Being able to diversify, we're opening up ourselves to new markets, but we're also, like I said, incorporating in new roots to that system to be able to diversify the microbiology that is actually happening in the soil. So what canola does, or brassica species, it produces quinolones. It's a big word for me, not for Josh. And it's like a disease suppressing effect. So by incorporating that in there, we're helping build that soil biology. So if that's not cover crops, look at different markets that you can be able to utilize in your area. Not everybody's going to have the opportunity to grow cotton or canola, but take a look around. Look at different options, because if we're being honest, I don't know how long we're going to be in this soybean rotation, especially if you think about imports and whatnot. Brazil is increasing their yields every single year, and they ship that stuff out immediately.
It's a second crop to them.
They don't have storage. And what does that mean for us if we're importing that stuff? We need to make sure that our markets are there. But if they're not going to be there, we have to pivot. So we have to look at some of these other crops.
There's a good source. There's an ethnobotanical database on the USDA. It's Dr. James Dukes. Everybody should look at that. I mean, I think you should, but you might not like it. But it tells you a lot about some cool stuff, what we're talking about.
Boy, what good answers, Callie. But I've got a good one myself. Finally.
You go ahead.
Finally,
Hear it.
I've got a good one. We've got to grow roots so that we can let the organic matter and the sequestered carbon work for our farms, reduce our costs by 30 to 40% on the input side. Healthier plants, better feedback, sell carbon. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
I tell my customers if we focus on being root farmers, we can swing this thing around.
I mean, just think about in the buying land or renting land world, what it would be if you took your acres and increased your organic matter 1% in the next 3 years.
Just 20,000 gallons of water staying home with you right there to begin
And
with.
how much, that's all profit.
And it'd be water farming too.
Yeah, be water farming.
Some of these things that we're trying to incorporate, that's one of the biggest advantages. We can hold on to the water that
There's also a
the
school of
Lord's
thought,
giving
though,
us.
the more, let's think about that real quick. So if you're trying, if we're trying to create biologically diverse soils, our organic matter may not go up as quick as we want because we have so much soluble carbon, we have so much food right there, so you're eating more and more of it. So maybe sheer organic matter is not the one score we need to be looking at. But we'll talk about that in a different
Because,
time.
I mean, there is a such thing as too much carbon because that carbon and nitrogen ratio. So if we have too much carbon, it's going to be ultimately eating some of that nitrogen is how I like to say. So it's like, we're not just trying to throw all of these, carbon farming things. There is a good balance there.
We're a few miles from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Big picture.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just saying that's not our
in
goal.
2049, we'll have that conversation.
Okay. Yeah, there we go.
If we're
Hey,
won't
we
be
can
here.
get there before then. Let's be optimistic.
They'll still be here. We won't.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Dang. That's kind of dark.
It's like,
Okay, that is a good place to draw the line for today before we get too down into this rabbit hole. But I want to thank y'all, as always, for joining me today, and I will see y'all next time.
thank
Thank you,
you.
Kelly.
Thanks.
Thank y'all for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more episodes.